I'm asking you guys, what do Scorpion and Sub-Zero have in common with Liu Kang and Shang Tsung, or Raiden and Shao Kahn, or even Havoc and Hotaru? They're rivalries, they're bitter enemies, and honestly, Rivalries is one of the biggest reasons Mortal Kombat became so popular in the first place. Just think about it. When people remember old Mortal Kombat, they don't just remember characters, they remember the conflicts between them, they remember the grudges, they remember characters who genuinely hate each other. Everybody knows Scorpion wanted to get revenge and he hates Sub-Zero so much. You wanted to see Liu Kang stop Shang Tsung. You wanted to see, say, Shao Kahn finally get what was coming to him. Those rivalries gave the story weight. They gave the characters purpose in the story, and most importantly, they made the fans care about them. But somewhere along the way in modern Mortal Kombat, they stopped focusing on rivalries. The old ones have been watered down and the new ones sort of barely exist. And the few rivalries MK1 introduced never got the time they needed to fully matter. So today let's talk about why Mortal Kombat forgot how to build meaningful rivalries. But before we get into that, if you guys don't know me by now, I'm Mr. Frosty Flames, but you can call me Mike. We do anything gaming, news, reviews, playthroughs, analysis, and we do it in a chill way with no over editing BS. So if you like that style of content, be sure to hit that sub button and join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Anyways, let's get back to the video. So I just want to start by saying back in the arcade era, Mortal Kombat's story wasn't incredibly complicated. There weren't any timeline BS, or there weren't any titans, there weren't multiple versions of the same character from different universes. What there was, however, was conflict. You knew Scorpion wanted revenge, you knew Sub-Zero wanted to survive, Liu Kang wanted to protect Earthrealm, Shang Tsung wanted to conquer it. The stories were simple, but because they were simple, they worked. The rivalries between the characters were easy to understand, and they gave every fight a purpose. You weren't just watching two characters punch each other, you were watching a story unfold. And think about it, it fits for a fighting game. If you have a rivalry between two characters, you could pit those two characters up against each other in a fight, and they could duke it out to the death, you know? Like, let's start with the obvious one, Scorpion versus Sub-Zero. This rivalry literally carried Mortal Kombat for decades. It was even like the head of the MKX trailer. It had betrayal, revenge, misunderstandings, redemption, everything. And what made it so great was that it evolved. It wasn't the same conflict forever. The characters changed, you know, their relationship changed. Sometimes they were against each other, sometimes they were teaming up, but the rivalry always mattered. Even those people who never played Mortal Kombat know who Scorpion and Sub-Zero are, and you could just see by their designs that they are just polar opposites, fire and ice. And that's how powerful a well-written rivalry and character design could be. And then you have Liu Kang versus Shang Tsung. This rivalry doesn't get enough credit in my opinion, because before all the timeline stuff, Shang Tsung was essentially Liu Kang's greatest enemy. This was Mortal Kombat's classic hero versus villain dynamic. The chosen champion against the manipulative sorcerer. So every interaction mattered, every victory felt important, and because they were constantly connected, both characters benefited. Liu Kang felt more heroic, Shang Tsung felt even more threatening, and that's what a good rivalry does. It improves both sides. And another one is Raiden versus Shao Kahn. You know, if Scorpion and Sub-Zero were the personal rivalry, Raiden and Shao Kahn were the big picture rivalry. Think about it, these weren't just two characters fighting, this represented Earthrealm versus Outworld, protection versus conquest, good versus evil. Every time Shao Kahn appeared, you could feel it. It feels serious, and every time Raiden opposed him, it felt important. There was some major history there, and fans were invested because they understood what was at stake. And even the 3D era understood this too, because one thing people don't give the 3D era enough credit for is how hard it tried to create new rivalries. Some worked better than others, but at least they existed and at least they tried. For example is Hotaru versus Havoc. That represented order versus chaos. The concept basically sells itself, however the execution just wasn't really there. I mean, they didn't really give it enough time to develop. It's like they just forgot about it. And then you also have some other minor ones like Cabal versus Mavado, Taven versus Dagon, Onaga versus basically everybody, again, the Deadly Alliance versus basically everyone. These rivalries may not have reached the Scorpion or Sub-Zero levels or the Shang Tsung versus Liu Kang levels, but they had potential, and that's what's important. The series was actively trying to create new conflicts, and this is why rivalries matter so much. This might sound obvious, but they create tension, they create investment. People love choosing sides. Hell, even sports are built on rivalries. WWE is built on rivalries. Anime is built on rivalries, even fighting games too, they're built on rivalries. A good rivalry creates anticipation, like you want to see the next fight, you want to see who wins, you want to see how the relationship evolves. And as you guys know, without rivalries, fights will just start to feel random, and random fights are just much harder to care about. And compare that to, say, Mortal Kombat 1, because their rivalries just don't hit the same, because this is where I think the problem becomes obvious. MK1 technically does have rivalries, the issue is that most of them don't feel important. For example, take Scorpion and Sub-Zero, or Reptile and Shang Tsung, or maybe Mileena and Kitana. The game introduces some conflict, but it rarely lets those conflicts breathe. Instead of building tension over multiple games, everything gets revolved incredibly fast. Like, for example, Mileena and Shao Kahn, or Sindel and Shao Kahn. You know how Shao Kahn is trying to create that outworld civil war and usurp the throne for himself? However, it just doesn't feel like the same. It doesn't have the same impact. It's like 3 fights or 2 chapters and then it's all done. They're in prison. The end. And I'm like, bruh, you don't even see anything happen, and then maybe at the end of Chaos Reigns, they're like, oh, Shao Kahn escaped prison, and then they're gonna start again, and that probably sets up for the next game. But it just doesn't get enough screen time to actually matter. Even in the original MK1 gameplay trailer, it really sets up for these rivalries to be more than what they are, like the Outworld Civil War, that just barely gets like a couple chapters. Raiden and General Shao, like they get a single fight or something, and then that's it, right, in the tournament. Like, it's crazy. They're just brushed aside entirely. Older Mortal Kombat games would spend years building a rivalry. MK1 introduces one, then moves on almost immediately. The intensity isn't there, the hatred isn't there, the obsession definitely isn't there, and because of that, the rivalries don't stick with players the same way. Even the old rivalries have been very watered down. This is another issue. Even the rivalries that do exist aren't as strong as they used to be. Take Scorpion and Sub-Zero, that's a great example. You know, I like the relationship in MK1, but let's be honest, it's nowhere near as intense as it used to be. The original rivalry felt legendary, it felt dangerous, personal. Modern Mortal Kombat often softens these conflicts. It's like they want to be like an MCU version of these characters or this story, and it just isn't Mortal Kombat. And while that could create interesting character moments, it also removes some of the tension that made fans care in the first place. And Mortal Kombat isn't building new ones either. This might be the biggest problem. If old rivalries are being toned down, that's fine, okay. What if we're replacing them with new ones, right? We aren't, and that's the issue. Think about the last truly iconic rivalry Mortal Kombat created. Not reused, but, you know, created. They made it. It's really hard to answer because most fans immediately go back to the ones that are decades old, and that should not be happening. A franchise this old should be constantly evolving, creating new characters and new tensions, new grudges, new conflicts, and new stories. Instead, Mortal Kombat keeps relying on the same rivalries from the 90s, and this is what Mortal Kombat needs to do. I think it needs to commit again. If Havoc is gonna be important, give him a true rival. Bring back Hotaru and reinvent him, reinvent the Order Realm. If Raiko is going to be important, give him a true rival. Maybe even have him rival against General Shao, his best friend. If Kenshi is going to be important, give him a true rival, then stick with it. Don't resolve it immediately. Don't reset the timeline. Don't move on game after game after game. Let these rivalries grow. Let them evolve. Let fans become invested, because that's how iconic rivalries are created. Not overnight, but over years. So in the end, the reason these rivalries are still remembered decades later isn't because the characters looked cool. I guess that's a little factor, but not the major factor. I feel like it's mostly because the conflicts felt meaningful. The characters cared, the fans cared, and the story cared. Modern Mortal Kombat still has great characters, don't get me wrong, but it needs to start treating those rivalries as a priority again, because without them, the fights feel less important, the stories feel less memorable, and the world feels less alive. And honestly, that's something Mortal Kombat desperately needs to fix, because in the end, it is a fighting game, an FGC game, so you need these rivalries to make the story matter if they're gonna go for these one-on-one fights. But that's just my take on it. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you guys want these rivalries to come back? If so, who would you want? For me, I would pick Hotaru versus Havoc. I really want Hotaru to come back in the modern Mortal Kombat era. I really like this concept of the Order, the Seto Guard. I just think he looked super badass and cool. It's a amazing, and he should definitely come back with a modern redesign. But let me know yours down below. If you like this video, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Thank you guys for watching. Mr. Frosty Flames out. Ciao.